Go ahead, I will call this meeting to order. And if you will please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. And now if you will join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And Madam Clerk, could you please call roll of school board members?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Bryant,
Present.
Ms. Dooley. Here. Dr. Kraft,
Present.
Ms. Torres,
Yes.
and our student rep, Allison. Or-
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now if I may call for a motion for approval of our agenda.
I so move.
Second.
Any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So I do want to just recognize the fact that we have Senator Creed and Delegate Hudson. So this is a wonderful opportunity here. This is our meeting where we get to discuss legislative priorities, and we appreciate you both always. But it's nice to kind of all be in the room together. We've done kind of hybrid Zooms the last year or two, so thank you very much. We do, and I believe we sent a list to each of you. But I'm happy to kind of turn it over. I don't know, Dr. Gurley, if you have anything that you'd like to lead with? Okay. And I don't know if we want to start with and just go around the room, or from school board members, or if either the senator or Delegate Hudson would like to bring anything up that you all have seen heading our way that we should flag or be concerned about.
It's going to be an interesting year. The governor has already said that he's going to embed some tax cuts in the budget, even though we're not fully funding K through 12 education. Once you've done the things you're supposed to do, you're required by law to do, tax cuts are fine, but we have to do what we're supposed to do first, and we haven't. So it's going to be another challenging year. There will be, I'm confident, some efforts to, I guess, promote school choice, either through charter schools or something else. I don't think those efforts are going to bear fruit in the Senate of Virginia, but I don't know. I know that there are a couple of Democratic members that have expressed support for some forms of school choice. So I guess we will have a robust debate.
I guess what I can do, Delegate Hudson, do you want to dovetail on that at all?
I think what it's on all of us in that climate to be very clear about our requests, because we know that the state budget, it's easy for things to get lost in the shuffle. And so I think it's important that coincidentally, the size of the tax cut that the governor is interested in promising is almost identical in size to how far behind we are on fully funding the SOQs. And so it really is a direct trade-off. Like, the General Assembly can make a one-for-one choice. We can cut corporate taxes and taxes on investment income, which have been driving the lion's share of the state surplus, or we can meet our obligation to our public schools. And I hope that all of us who are part of raising the broader agenda around funding public education can put a really fine point on it, because I think that's what will help us hold the administration's feet to the fire so that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of budget mumbo jumbo.
Thank you both for that. I mean, I think we've all kind of heard that and are watching that as well. So we always appreciate your support for public education. I mean, if you look at the list that we've provided you, and I know that we spoke with both of you last year and appreciate your supports for the special sales tax. I don't know if either of you have heard if that is going to be brought forward again.
Well, I'm gonna have a bill to allow a special sales tax for both the city and the county, a referenda. I'm gonna do it a little differently this time. What I didn't do last time, and frankly, I didn't think to do, was put in a budget amendment that basically incorporates the same language. If, once we got a budget passed, we had some discussion about being able to include this in the final budget, that to bypass the legislative roadblock that we had. And it didn't happen, in large part because the budget conference was handled in a way like it had never been handled before, number one. And that involved just 3 negotiators, and they all had their own priorities. And this apparently wasn't. I had some staff priorities, but I also had some staff people say to me that they wish they'd stuck this in the budget while it was still in, the budget was still in the Senate. And so I'm going to try both approaches. I don't know that the dynamics in the House Finance Committee will change. But if I can put a bill out there, I can give it a try to see if it'll change. If I can get it in the budget, that gives us another shot at it. That's what I'm going to try to do.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that the House is the problem on that one. I mean, the statewide sales tax option passed with wide bipartisan support in the Senate. And I know anybody who was watching that Finance Committee closely saw that those bills died with no debate or organized opposition. It was purely a political maneuver. It's unfortunate that we have to consider the option of legislating through the budget. That is not really how well-wrought policy ought to be done. But if it's worth it, I mean, I think it's a comment on the deeper brokenness in Richmond that we even have to consider that avenue. But in the near term, if we're trying to get the taxing authority that we need to do the renovation, then it's an option worth considering.
Do either of you know where the governor stands on this?
I don't get the sense that he has strong feelings. I mean, the handful of House members who chose to kill that bill, the leadership of that very small Finance Committee, have just put a stake in the ground on no new taxes. I mean, it was really quite wild to watch the chair of that finance subcommittee who represents Lynchburg and say, my constituents sent me here to hold down taxes. I guarantee if you walk down Main Street in Lynchburg and said, how do you feel about the city of Charlottesville raising some revenue to redo its middle school? They'd say, I don't care. So, I really do think that it had been reduced to a political talking point, and I don't think there's a lot of sound policy behind it. I don't think the governor's probably much engaged on it.
I agree with that. I don't think I don't know that we can predict how the governor will handle this yet, but there were Republican members on the Budget Conference Committee that were prepared to support this from the House of Delegates. If the conference committee had met the way it's met in the past, I'm confident we could have gotten it in there. It didn't meet. There were the chairman of the Appropriations Committee and the chairman and vice chair of the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee did the budget. And this just didn't fit into their list of priorities. So I think that and Sally's right. This is probably not the way to do public policy through the budget, but this might be the only way we can get it done.
I mean, we had many a Republican House patron signed on to the bill. If the bill could have gotten to the House floor, there were more than enough votes to get it out. So it was pure maneuvering.
I think it might have even passed at the full committee.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you both continuing to advocate for that. I mean, it's important, not just for Charlottesville, but for any locality who wants to take that avenue on themselves to, to consider that for their schools. So.
Can I just follow up one a little bit more? And is there any desirability for, say, our school division to reach out to these individuals on this issue? Or for anyone to reach out?
I appreciate the effort. I really do think you did all that you could. I mean, if you think about the incredible range of organizations that advocated for that bill, the School Board Association, the VEA, the Coalition of Small and Rural Schools, the Virginia Association of Counties, the Virginia Municipal League. That bill was carried by delegates from Charlottesville and Prince Edward. It had support from delegates from Nelson. I mean, it was red and blue alike. This was a truly cross-partisan effort. I think we did our homework. I think that it got bottlenecked by a very small handful of people who decided they need to prove a point. But I think that all of those, particularly those statewide organizations, are doing everything they can to mobilize. I guess here's the one place, if we're just trying to be creative. If there are folks in Lynchburg who you think you could get to, because that's where the chair of that committee lives. If we're just trying to leave no stone unturned, I think trying to build an alliance in that way is worth considering.
All right. Anything else on that? Board members that you'd like to bring up? And staff, Ms. Powell, or anybody, if you have any questions or input, please.
We have a number of employees who commute from Waynesboro and Stanton area, and they had a member on that committee as well. We reached out in the end to some of our colleagues who that is their representative because it's where they live. Clearly, all of our collective efforts fell a little short, but there, in addition to Lynchburg, those 3 or so folks, it was that Augusta, Waynesboro area. Forgive me, the names are escaping me now, but if you look back at the meeting, there's 3. And
think-
we have folks who live in that one area who
Is that,
work for
is that
us.
Chris Runyon?
Yes.
Was he on
thank
that
you.
subcommittee?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly who it
Yeah.
was. Thank you.
Well, and my sense is he would have voted for this, but there was just a decision made that was probably a little over his head. I don't know.
All right. The next legislative topic on our list is the staffing ratio for school-based aftercare programs. So I don't know if you've seen or heard of any legislation that, that has to do with the raise the staff to student ratios for school-based aftercare programs.
I can speak to that because Delegate Toscano previously was instrumental in helping us resolve this issue for the brief period that school-based aftercare programs went from being administered under VDOE to under the DSS licensure. And for that brief period, when our after-school programs went under DSS licensure requirements, we really struggled to meet the ratios that you have to have as our IAs, instructional assistants and so forth. That's the primary staff for these aftercare programs. They're really essential, right? Because they transition right from their work in the classrooms into the after-school program, which is really essential for our working families. What happens is there's this window of time as those folks are helping to end their school-based job before they can get to their job with what is now operated by the YMCA for us. Our after-school program is in partnership with the YMCA, but they still rely on our school employees to provide that staffing. It's not a situation where the children aren't supervised and that there's not adequate supervision, in our opinion. The program's operating no differently than it did when it was fully operated by Charlottesville City Schools. And we were successful in getting this resolved through the efforts of Delegate Toscano and some different folks who went and testified. The problem is we've slipped back into that issue now that we have the same after-school program administered by the YMCA with essentially the same level of supervision during that transition period, but they're going to be constantly written up for not meeting the ratio requirements that DSS has, which DSS has very strict licensure requirements for childcare. That's not a bad thing, but this is an area where we need a little bit of operational grace. And our local CEO for the YMCA, Jessica Maslany, would be an excellent person to give additional detail and testify about what this looks like for them. It just is they operate a great program, and it really, and our families need this program, and they need our staff to transition from their school job into that program. I don't want to minimize it to a technicality, but they really don't like getting this one ding as a entity that's responsible for our youth. And so because when we got the rules changed back to what they were for the last year that we operated what we called the class program, everything was fine. And it's just
Is the DSS standard a ratio driven by statute or by regulation?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. It's, I know anyone who's ever operated a preschool or a childcare center, to them, it's law. I mean,
Yeah.
they take it very seriously, but I'm sorry, I don't know if it's considered, which it's considered, but I do know we did get relief. We saw it change when we were under DSS. And then we shifted back to VDOE and that effort with the Delegate Toscano worked beautifully for us. We had one painful year where we just couldn't pass the test, so to speak, even though nothing had changed with how we were operating for years. I mean, the class program is a pretty old program in Charlottesville City Schools. So now our partner is saying, gosh, can you get us some relief? Because we need it feels like Groundhog Day. So, and again, Jessica Maslany with the YMCA, who's an expert on licensure, be happy to put you in touch with her for additional details. She would be a great spokesperson for the issue.
That'd be great. It does sound like the first order of business is for us to figure out whether this is something that is in regulation and then they have some discretion to change it during the off season, or if we need to change it in state law going into session.
Thank you. Okay.
The next topic or legislative topic would be staffing for second chance programs. So we are supportive, and I do want to, in the case here, Mr. Morse, one of our colleagues was not able to make it, and he's very supportive of this. So I promised him that I would plug his name here, but we were hoping to get some support around this topic as far as second chance procedures for job applicants with specific nonviolent felony records, with always an eye on safety, student safety, but these changes could then broaden the application pool for positions such as custodians and school bus drivers and such. So we were hoping for
And
your.
Can you help me understand, is this connected in addition to the interest that former Counselor Bellamy and Rob Gray from the Uhuru Foundation have about partnering with mentoring programs? I ask because there's one question about whether folks with prior convictions can be hired as staff, say to be a custodian. And there's a separate question about whether someone who is employed by another program could do programming or even volunteer work inside of the schools. And I feel like I was talking with Dr. Bellamy and Mr. Gray about this, and we were trying to understand where in your policies this happens to work. Or is this completely separate from that? And I'm connecting the dots.
I think it's connected, but I think the bigger issue is the barrier crime issue. There are certain fences under Virginia law that prohibit people from doing certain kinds of work. And Virginia's undertaken an examination of the barrier crimes probably the last 2 or 3 years. I'm not really sure where that stands today.
I serve on the barrier crime subcommittee, so
Okay.
I can tell you where those bills died last session. But I think what I would like to understand is this separate from questions about volunteer mentors?
I don't know. I don't know if,
So
Ms. Powell, go ahead.
this came up when, because the custodial staffing and our bus driver shortage fall in my area. So this was something that came up through discussions I've had with community members, probably some of the same people who have spoken with
Yeah.
you. So I think, I'm not going to say it's not connected to other things you're hearing about, but when Beth Chuck came to me about different things where you all could potentially help us, there have been situations where people have applied as custodians or as bus drivers where they don't have violent or criminal acts involving children. It could be something involving fraud or whatever, but it's been years ago. And it's just, sometimes there have been people that we've had to turn away that we think, well, maybe they actually could have done a great job had it not been for, I learned a new term, a barrier crime that was in their past. So that's, I think that's why it's on this list.
So I think I'm sorry for conflating the two. I think this is separate from the curricular question that I had. I think then our best opportunity to tackle that might be to team up with the county because right now the very real bottleneck in the barrier crimes legislation is the committee chair, who is the delegate from Albemarle. The Delegate Bell has not been amenable to relaxing barrier crimes. I carried a bill last year that attempted to do a very targeted thing, which was to relax barrier crimes for small drug possession offenses for people who specifically wanted to work in substance abuse treatment, for whom their prior involvement with drug offenses in some ways makes them uniquely qualified to be involved in substance abuse treatment and prevention. And even that was a no-go with Delegate Bell. But he is the chair of the Barrier Crime Subcommittee. And he is, very nearby. And I'm certain that the county schools, if this is coming from a staff shortage question about support staff, then I have to imagine that the county schools are also experiencing similar pressures. And so if there were some way that we might approach him jointly, it's worth considering.
Thank you.
Well, I do think the issue of the mentors in the community, there are a couple of groups that really want to work with some of our students who, have been struggling and, where maybe even traditional mental health services and providers may not be the right avenue to connect with these students. And I think there are also barriers there because of some of their prior history, which, on the one hand is a problem. On the other hand, it actually is what might make them successful and effective, whereas other people wouldn't be. So I don't know what that falls under, if it's similar, and if there's anything that can be done to enable some of this work in our schools.
Dr. Gurley, do you know what the school division's current policy is around either third-party temporary programming, like a visitor from another organization or a volunteer? Because I think Dr. Bellamy and I tried to do some searching in the school division's handbook and left with some questions about how that works.
So currently, and Miss Lewis can help me with this too. So currently, when we have visitors to our building, we use their license to use for the Raptor system. And the Raptor system is connected to anyone that is on our sex offender website, the sex offender registry, I'm sorry. And so that's any visitor right now that's that comes into our building. Now, I would say that I'm just in hearing some of the conversations that Ms. Lewis has had recently with employees. I know that on a temporary basis, while we're waiting for background checks to come in, as long as we can assure that that they're not going to be alone with students one-to-one. So say if you come in, Delegate Hudson, if you come in to work with our students and your background check does not come back, as long as we can assure that there's going to be an employee with you all the time, then you can work in concert with those students. I believe that that's similar for mentoring too, correct? I know Denise Johnson in the back, she's working to spearhead some things with our volunteers, and that's one area that we do need to firm up. But I do agree with the conversation that sometimes these things do become a barrier with bringing people from the outside in. But I would say that, what I definitely would support is similar to what we're currently doing, as long as we can ensure that we are supervising the individuals coming in our building and we're not leaving them with our students. That's something that I definitely would support. So if there's something that we need to relax that won't leave us vulnerable, I believe that most certainly I can support that.
And in particular, I think the distinction that Dr. Kraft drew between nonviolent offenses, maybe petty theft or drug use years ago, is different from a violent crime in which there may have been a
Absolutely. So, employees, so if someone applies and they have a felony on there and they have a felony it does become a barrier. And I mean, just in some of my previous roles, know that, there have been some issues from people when they were back in their college years, when they were young adults, not making good choices, but most certainly they're different individuals right now. Those things have prevented them from being able to move forward with employment. So those types of things, yes, I mean, when we see that people have made different choices in their lives, I mean, we all can support to give them a second chance. And they can work with our students. Because that is one of the things currently, that if they have that felony, that they won't be employed. So.
So I have a question, either Senator Dees. What about individuals who have gotten their rights back? And they were in, would they be able to volunteer and work in our schools? Those who've gotten their rights back and are able to vote?
They're parallel but separate processes. So there are, any felony would remove your rights temporarily, and then you would go through the process of restoring your rights. It's a special set of felonies that constitute barrier crimes for which the state prevents employment in sensitive occupations, typically in human services. But if I'm understanding you right, Dr. Gurley, it sounds like perhaps I might talk more with Ms. Johnson about volunteer opportunities, and perhaps we could explore a collaboration with the county on the broader staffing issue, which I think there is currently a higher bar in state code for employment separate from a visitor.
Right. And what also just came to my mind also, coaches are considered volunteers in our policy. So, and I know within that currently the background check is required. So we sort of kind of have a definition already for volunteers, but I think with regards to what Denise Johnson is talking about in terms of standardizing that so that it looks the same across schools. Yep, we definitely have an opportunity here to do something very special.
Thank you all. Any more on that? All right, so our next legislative topic that we'd like to ask for some help with is around school transportation. I don't know if you've heard, but we're struggling a bit with school transportation. And this specifically would hopefully allow greater flexibility for activity buses, not necessarily yellow buses, to serve daily transportation needs. So last year there was a change to allow an S endorsement on a regular driver's license to allow driving the type A buses for up to 14 passengers. And we'd like to extend this to include type A or type B buses carrying up to 20 passengers. So I think this type of legislation or support for this would greatly impact us and our ability to transport teams and for other activities like that.
Also for things like, aftercare transportation for preschool, which has been an issue. I think that we haven't been able to do that. And perhaps, with these smaller buses, we could at least provide some of that service.
Ms. Powell, do you have?
To provide some additional clarification on the activity bus point, we don't want to do anything to make our transportation for students less safe. We understand the value of a yellow bus, but we have situations where we'll have like a neighborhood or a program where a large number of students need to get on at one stop. And it would be so much more cost effective to do that with a activity bus that's not yellow, because as we've looked at the cost of smaller buses and being able to do different things to solve our problems, the cost of a bus goes up a lot when it has to be yellow and have every safety feature. But I think the key on that first point, to be reasonable, is that it can be used for daily transportation as long as it's not making multiple stops on a route. If you're going out to pick up a group of students and transport them, even if it's for daily transportation, it would be much more cost-effective investment to do that with an activity bus that's not where you're not paying for everything that comes with the yellow. And then on the next point, again, as we've talked with the different sales manufacturer people, who do the different like type A buses. That was huge last year. The S endorsement on the regular license, reverting back to that instead of requiring the S endorsement on the CDL.
Maybe explain for me the difference between a type A and a type B.
So I'm no expert, but it has to do with, actually, I probably shouldn't speak to that, but there are type A and type B that go up to 20 passengers. And the key is, can we get from 14 to 20? They don't look that different. But, and from talking with these companies that work in multiple states, I believe, my understanding is there are other, like Pennsylvania, where you can do the 20 passenger bus, it would fall under the same criteria. So we're just trying to be as cost effective as possible as we invest in these smaller vehicles. And so those are some little nuances that could help.
I just want to do some research to figure out what the difference is between an A and a B, and what, if there's safety differences, what are they?
That's a good point, and I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to speak better to the difference between A and B. I know they both have 20 passenger models.
You are down now, what, 5 or 6 bus drivers?
7 to
7.
9, depending on the number of CAT drivers who are helping us out. We're going to see a nice improvement in that. November the 9th, we're releasing a new route set, and we're hopeful. And our city just made a significant move to make us more competitive in our region with this base wage rate and pay scale. So we're very grateful for that.
Well, yeah, that is significant. Let me look at the differences, and I'll do a little research on my own and figure out whether I can do this bill. You know, back in 2019, at the request of the county, Delegate Bell and I carried bills to basically allow retired bus drivers to come back to work, because the county was experiencing a shortage then. And what I found out when we got the bill down there is the shortage was statewide. And now you're the poster child for school bus driver shortages. Well, the VRS, really, the VRS is scared to death about anything that's gonna, I guess, cost more money in the long run for them. And they don't want to offer any encouragement for people to retire and then come back to work and be able to double dip. And so they insisted on having a 12-month waiting period in that bill. And the 12 months is not satisfactory. What I'm working on now is another bill to basically eliminate the 12-month requirement if a school division can cite a certain percentage of unemployed school bus drivers, or have a certain unemployment rate, and have to make a reporting period on a fairly regular basis. It's going to create a pain in the rear, but I think VRS might be satisfied with it.
Does VRS respond to the level of crisis that this has been for many school divisions?
They, at the time we put that bill in 2019, this was a crisis, but not as much of a crisis as it's become. So I don't know if they'll take a look at it with a different set of eyes now or not. I haven't talked to them yet. I'm still working on the language.
Senator Deeds, on that, I think didn't they end up classifying the drivers as critical shortage? And so that it
They did.
reduces that, it should, that by virtue of declaring it critical shortage should reduce the gap that's required to like a month, 30 days or something like that. I think that's the practice with some teachers.
Well, they are classified as critical shortage, but the law itself says 12 months.
So well,
For
and
school
that
bus
is
drivers.
great for the counties. I will say for Charlottesville, our drivers aren't on VRS because they're employed by CAT, and the
Okay.
Charlottesville city's not on the pension, but definitely for the brethren counties, that's a huge thing, and I wish you well with that.
Madam Chair, could I ask more generally how the transportation situation is going? I mean, we got little pieces here and there, and I know the city's wage increase is a big step. Are there other pieces that are worth putting on our radar at the time? And I mean, I know that everybody has been trying to move heaven and earth, and I was just hoping to stay.
Yeah,
up to
I mean, I
speed.
think Ms. Powell did a recent update in one of our board meetings, where we do have a couple of CAT drivers helping out. We have some in training, I think 3 to 4 in training, if I remember. I think that the changes that we've made as a division to the walk zones have made a huge impact, positively for lots of different reasons. So I think, from that perspective, along with Dr. Gurley and Ms. Powell and staff meeting with the city and communicating and keeping this, front and center as far as how they can best support us. I think that, we are seeing, like we just did, we saw the increase in salary or hourly rate that they're offering to bus drivers. So we hope to see, an influx of drivers flocking to Charlottesville to help us out here soon. I know that, like, as Ms. Powell said, we did order, and we hope to have a couple of the type A buses, I think, which can, but I believe there are some back order on those. So we're looking at potentially spring, early or late spring, before those are even ready to make a dent. I know at one point we did even consider electric buses, and that was a discussion, and I think is a discussion we're willing to continue, but we haven't really moved on that yet. What else? Is there anything else specifically?
At the, we've had some success with our older kids in having them ride cat buses. And I think, that's been interesting. And I think there's been a lot of families, or some families, who have been very happy with that solution. It isn't something that can work, for our littlest kids. We can't really do that. But we are, I think, being as creative as, beyond what I thought we could do here, and trying everything. And I think we're sort of at the limit of what we can do. And the shortages are a constant issue and problem for us.
I think not necessarily, it is related to transportation and the number of students and people we're now seeing walking. So from a safety perspective within the community, and Sally, you and I were out there at one of the the walking stops the first day of school, so seeing some of the changes that the city has done, but we know that there continues to be a lot of areas within Charlottesville City, and I'm sure the county too, but more the city, that are just unsafe for pedestrians to be walking, for bikers. So I think, continuing for everybody to put some pressure on those that can, or support, to make changes just for safer walk zones, sidewalks, crosswalks, lighting, speed limits, all of those types of things. I think we need to continue to really have a conversation about, and to be as proactive for safety as we can. Was there anything else specific that you were?
No, that's great. Thank you very much for the added context.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I guess moving on again, and as always, we, as a school division and as a school board, continue to prioritize, salary increases and supporting our staff and teachers. So as that falls within the budget and funding, from the governor and how he's managing his budget and standards of quality position. Again, to fully fund that and push for all of that. We'd appreciate your guys' ongoing support for that. The next topic would be, falls under educational employment, and has to do with fact-finding panel for grievances and dismissals. I guess we've heard that there's a return, or going to be a return, to the pre-2013 legislation regarding the grievance and dismissal procedure allowed to school boards to either utilize a 3-member fact-finding panel or a hearing officer. So as a result of the 2013 General Assembly, a hearing officer must be appointed for all grievance dismissal proceedings. So I don't know if either of you,
You've heard there's going to be a change.
I believe that's what VSBA also had brought to us, that they're looking to revert back to that.
Well, is the goal of that just to have more flexibility in how these procedures are handled. Is that the idea?
I know the current policy, the state code, it ends in 209. And the current state code reads that in a dismissal, the board has a discretion to hear it as the entire board, or the board can elect to have a hearing officer if in the situations where an employee is terminated and grieves so I'm not quite sure what the return to pre-2013 references.
I've done those hearings before, that each side, picks one and then they pick a third person who serves as chair of the grievance committee. I've done those hearings before and that the procedure worked pretty well, I thought. I'm not sure why it was changed. But I'll be interested in seeing any bill that comes forward.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it came from.
And it sounds like the current set of options is very narrow. It's hearing officer only. And there's a discussion about expanding the options to include the 3-member panel to make that an option again. Am I reading that correctly?
It's not the current statute. The current statute is not, it's state code and the state code ends in 209. I can't think of what the current state statute reads that in the cases of agreement, if the employee challenges the termination, that they send the appeal to the school board, and the school board may elect that if they don't want to hear it as a full board, that a hearing officer can be appointed.
All right, and then moving, I guess, beyond that, unless anybody has some questions around that, a few of us, I believe, attended the VSBA conference recently, and they presented kind of what they're anticipating as far as the VSBA legislative priorities. As far as anything that would be brought forward with a mandate, as far as VSBA supporting fully funding any mandates that are associated with legislation. One big topic, I'm sure that, and we've all heard from the governor as far as school safety and SROs in the building. And as you know, we at Charlottesville are one of, I think, a handful of schools who have a different model. And so we are not necessarily looking to, be mandated or be penalized for not having an SRO in the building. And I don't know if either of you have heard anything about that.
Legislation that's going to be proposed, but there certainly could be something.
Again, I mean, there was a lot of talk, and then we've already touched on it a little bit as far as school infrastructure and modernization. I know Senator McClellan had, a lot of her legislation. I mean, it felt like a win, but, it wasn't a win. And we know it was just a teeny tiny drop in the bucket as far as what all of the schools throughout the Commonwealth really need, to address the aging buildings. I did speak with Delegate Hudson a little bit about air quality, and I appreciated the conversation as far as, and we as Charlottesville schools have used some of our early CARES money and funding to really invest in improving our air quality to the best that our systems can manage. And so just her conversation with me and looking at if there's anything that's going to be brought forward again as far as standards of maintenance or under that, as far as air quality, I would love personally to just have that supported, as we know that air quality positively impacts just learning, and so we are looking forward to having our middle school renovation and having, improved air quality and just energy conservation there. So would love just support or guidance, if you guys hear of anything on how we can support those types of things moving forward. Anything else from board members or Dr. Gurley or staff that you'd like to highlight? I don't want to leave anything out. Any support that you can offer as far as, teacher support, hiring, employee shortages. So I don't know if there's anything.
Well, I guess I have a question about, and maybe this is more of a political question, I don't know, but it seems, reading through some of these, it seems like there is a move to impose mandates that would limit the authority of local school boards in certain areas. And I wonder, like with school safety as one example, to take away the authority of a local school board to implement the model of their choice, rather than have something imposed on us, by a state mandate. And I don't know, I think there's some other areas as well, charter schools, things like that. And just wondering for either of you, what is your sense of this?
Hunter Andrews used to say, the governor proposes, the General Assembly disposes. They can make any proposals they want. I don't think they're going to pass the Senate of Virginia. If they pass on unfunded mandates with respect to staffing or school safety or charter schools, but we'll see. I don't, my sense is that they won't pass.
I think historically, both parties support local control when they're out of power. And when the party has the governor's mansion, then they want to run things their way and tell local school divisions how to do their job. And when you would rather not have the intervention of the governor. So I hope that we can continue to protect what is the state constitution's very clear mandate for local school boards to control local school divisions.
Anything else from school board members? All right, and do we have anybody joining us in the public or online? Okay. Anything else you would like for us to have on our radar as far as supporting you all?
The only larger policy area that I think I'm hearing more chatter about and would like to talk with you about over the course of the coming weeks is increasing interest in more alternative pathways to licensure, particularly with folks with potentially non-traditional pathways into education, especially in technical fields. As we need more and more STEM instructors and people who've had varied career paths. I would like to stay in communication with all of you about how to do that in a way that encourages educators with rich and diverse backgrounds while also maintaining the high standards that, of course, we want for instructors. I think that that's something that I'm hearing more interest in. I think always, but especially now with the severe teacher shortage.
Thank you. Senator Deeds, anything else from you?
It's somewhat discouraging that our highest paying localities are just across the river from localities that pay $10,000 more. I'm talking about Fairfax and Arlington, and Montgomery County, Maryland pays more money than they do. So we have to step our game up. I'm convinced that the teacher shortage would disappear if we could actually fully fund education and fund teacher pay.
Well, we appreciate both of your voices and all the work that you do. And we need to also, as a locality, remember to reach out to Senator Kane and Warner and ask them to continue their work at the at the national level to continue to support education. So any other questions, comments, staff?
Well, can you kind of keep us alerted if there are, committees that you would like us to, somebody to come and appear? And just let us know the best use of that for us. I think we have lots of people in our community who would be willing and eager to do that.
Yeah, and I appreciate, just the tips to reach out to Albemarle, so we can definitely do that and follow up with school board members there. And anything else that anybody would like to bring forward?
I think that part of what's sort of in flux about the politics in the county is that the county's House delegation is about to change so dramatically with the new General Assembly maps that, for example, two of the legislators who have been representing the county, the delegate who also represents Augusta, and then also to further south, they know that they're not going to be representing Albemarle anymore. And so I think we don't really know how invested the current members of the Albemarle delegation will be in the future of the Albemarle County School Division until we get a new delegate who's settled and rooted there. So it may be a little bit challenging in this interim period.
Ms. Chuck, I see you sitting back there and you're always very knowledgeable with all of this. Do you have anything that you feel like that we should bring forward or that we've missed?
And thank you all for your such strong community voices, especially in light of some of the recent news that has come out from Richmond that we know is it would be a distraction if it weren't so dangerous. And I appreciate the steady drumbeat that you constantly provide to reassure our community that all of our students are safe and welcome in school so that we can focus on the teaching and the learning, which I know is what we're all here to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we thank you both for supporting us in that and your voices in Richmond. So thank you. All right. If there are no further comments, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you both again. We appreciate you.